Dive into the successful bookkeeper with the amazing Ron Baker. I'm so excited to be able to welcome Ron Baker into this interview. Ron, you introduced value pricing into your accounting firm in 1989, like way back then, before the rest of the world even knew about value pricing. You've literally written the book on value pricing. Actually, you've written 6, but the latest 2 are the Bible for many bookkeepers and accountants, implementing value pricing. And now your exciting book that we're going to be talking about later on, that you've co-written with Paul Dunn, called Time's Up. Fantastic name. It's on Amazon for pre-order currently. Your insights on pricing are highly sought after by accountants and bookkeepers worldwide. Ron Baker, I'm so excited to spend the next hour with you to help inspire our audience to learn how to value price, and obviously talk about subscription pricing now through the services, for their services through your lens. So welcome to Power Hour.
Oh, well, thanks, Sharon. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I just can't wait to have the conversation. We've been lucky enough to have the last 10 or 15 minutes chatting, and I'm really excited just to hear some of the things that you're talking about and the things for the future. So my first question to you is, you've been quoted as saying, value at the end of the day is not a number, it's a feeling. I absolutely love this. Can you expand on this for what you mean around this for our audience?
Yeah, and I know this freaks accountants out, and I should say I am a recovering CPA. And worse, I'm a recovering cost accountant to boot, so I repent every day. But when you think about a transaction, there's 3 components. There's the value, there's the price, and there's the cost. Now, accountants will focus on the price and the cost. But obviously profit, when we say profit in accounting, we mean the profit to the seller. But economists for centuries have been talking about value to the customer, and also that the customer makes a profit when they enter into a transaction and consummate a transaction. So when you go to your favorite coffee shop, which I know in Australia is not Starbucks, I think you guys have the greatest coffee in the world, by the way, and you buy a $4, what's the flat white? I love the flat white.
Yes.
So you pay $4. Now, a bookkeeper will look at that, or an accountant, and they'll say, okay, you paid $4. That was the price. Hopefully it costs the business less than $4 to produce it, and that's their profit. But an economist adds the value layer and says, okay, but what's the value to the customer? Now, that's something that can't be precisely measured. I don't know if it's $4.10. I don't know if it's $5. I don't know if it's $20 because you were hungover from too many tequila shots last night and have to get to the office and get on Zoom meetings all day. But what we do know is it's a voluntary transaction. Nobody's got a gun to your head. And therefore, if you spent $4 on that flat white, it had to be worth more than $4 to you. And that's called the customer's profit. And here's the problem, Sharon. When we book that transaction, we book it at $4, both on the buyer side. If they were to book it, like say into a home accounting system, I spent $4 on cash and on coffee. And then of course the business books it at $4. But where's the customer value? It's not there. And yet the customer value is what all transactions are based on. And therefore our economic statistics, GDP, national income, all of that, it ignores this. And yet economists have known for centuries that it's there. So when you think about value, that's why we say it's a feeling, because I can't precisely measure it. I don't know if it was worth $4.25 to you or $20, but I know it was worth more than $4. Otherwise, you would have just stayed home and made a cup of coffee on your own. And even though I think Australia's coffee is great, it's probably not 10 times greater than what you could have made at home, or 40 times greater than what you could have made at home. So something's going on there, and that's why I think value is a feeling.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. And I'm guess through my questions as we go forward, I guess we'll unpack that a bit, because I feel like I want to go deeper into what you've just said, but you'll unfold that a little bit. How we actually...
It's a very rich and complex issue. Let me just add a couple things to it. One is all value is subjective, and 2, all prices are contextual. So what I mean by subjective value is if you think about a bottle of water, we know the price of that. We know what we'd pay for it in a grocery store, or maybe at Sam's Club or Costco or something like that, or in an AFL, football stadium, right? I love AFL, by the way, the Australian football. That's wonderful. And so that's the price. But what about the value? Well, if I've been in the outback for 5 days and I haven't had any water, what's the value of that bottle of water to me? Certainly a lot more than even I'd pay for it at an airport. I'd give everything I had plus go into debt for it because the context is going to save my life. But if I'm home washing the dishes with the same quantity of water, now it's worth a lot less to me. And if I'm flooded in my basement with water, now it's got a negative value. Well, here's the conundrum with that example. Accounting can't explain that.
Yes.
Accounting can't explain that gap in value. It certainly can't be attributed to cost differences, because the cost differences of getting that water to those three places, the desert and my dog and all, it's the same or relatively the same, but the value goes from negative to infinite. Well, in order to understand that value component, not the price or the cost, the value component, you have to have a theory. And that theory is that all value is subjective. So that's
Yeah.
what we mean by that. So what, in fact, if you think about it, we record as accountants debits equal credits. In the real world, debits don't equal credits because they don't account for the customer value.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And that's why it's so important when we talk about individually pricing. We're not doing a broad brush, this is our price. We go individually with our pricing. Yeah.
Right. We're pricing the customer, not the services. That, when we did hourly billing, we priced the inputs. How many labor hours is it going to take, blah, 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 or how many labor hours did it take? Because usually we'd be sending the bills in arrears after the job was over. When we moved to fixed pricing, before we got to value pricing, we were pricing the outputs. Here's a defined scope of work and here's our price for it. So we did that one in advance. Then when we taught value pricing, we taught to price the customer, not the services, but the customer, because every customer has a different perception of value. And of course, now that we're in the subscription economy, we're teaching about pricing the relationship, which is different than pricing the customer. We can talk about that when we get to the book.
Yeah. 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 So what, just to go off track a little bit, but like, what's your views on like, having our prices on our websites or having that structured, the small, the middle and the large pricing around that? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's going to be different between what I just call value pricing 1.0 and value pricing 2.0, which is really subscription. In 2.0 in subscription, it might be advisable to post your prices. In 1.0, I would have said never post your prices because you're customizing it for each customer. But in 2.0, it's probably more likely than less that you'd be posting your prices. But here's the thing with this, and we can go down this rabbit hole if you want, but no matter how you price, I don't care if it's hourly, I don't care if it's fixed, I don't care if it's value, I don't care if it's subscription. It's all driven by your firm's strategy. What's your ideal customer? What's your firm's positioning? Are you a steakhouse? Are you McDonald's? Are you a vegan restaurant? And the problem with our profession, Sharon, is we try and be all things to all people. We have a little bit of each. And a brand can only stand for one thing. You can't sell Rolls Royces and Chevys out of the same dealership. It'll confuse the market. It'll complicate everything. And so it's the strategy and the positioning that drives your pricing strategy. But the strategy and the positioning are the senior partner. You can't figure out your pricing until you have a clear strategy and a clear position in the market. And I think a lot of firms get that wrong. They want to dive right into the pricing. And so that's why my answer is so contextual on it depends on what your strategy is. For example, if you did nothing but dentists and they were all relatively the same size, you didn't do national franchises, you didn't do, 20 office dental practices, you just did maybe 1 or 2 office dental practices, you probably could post your prices on your website.
Yeah. Okay. Can we go down the rabbit warren a little bit more?
Sure.
Niching or niching, as you call it. So your opinion, like based on what you've just said, how does that play into niching and with this overall strategy, how important is that in your eyes?
It's critical.
Yeah.
In fact, I know you have a question, and I get asked this a lot. If you were to start over
Yeah.
from the ground up, what would you do differently? Obviously, I'd value price, or now I'd be subscription. Obviously, I would have never kept timesheets. And the third one is I would have niched.
Yeah.
And the only thing my customers had in common were they were my customers. I had industrial manufacturers, I had people, I had retail, I had some cluster of service professionals, had a little bit of everything, because I think a lot of us get into public accounting because we like the diversity.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great intellectually. It's a really crappy business model. The more you put yourself in a box, I think firms are defined, and I mean defined, by the customers they don't have and the
Mm.
services they don't provide. That's what defines you. Strategy is all about saying no.
Yeah.
Here's what
Yeah.
we don't do, and what we do is very, very limited. I mean, I'll give you a real quick example. Look at Apple and look at Hewlett Packard. Last time I looked, Hewlett Packard had something like 15,000 SKUs,
Mm.
printers, ink, all sorts. Apple has less than 100.
Wow.
Apple's worth $2 trillion. Why? Because they're intently focused. If Apple's going to do something, the only reason they'll do it is because they think they can be best in the world at it, or world class at it. And so that limits what they do. And they get a lot of ideas. Apple's full of really smart people that say, "Oh, we should do this, we should do that." Most of them are shot down because they
Mm.
want to stay incredibly focused.
Mm. Mm. And that takes me to, I've got a question in here because I keep wanting to say the level of confidence to do that. You've got to have confidence to do it, right? And so I'm just coming, I'll zip forward to this question about confidence that I've got in here. Basically, how do you get the confidence to do that? Like, because when you're starting out, or even as you're building your business, when somebody comes to you and they're not in that niche that you're sort of targeting, how do you resolve that in your mind and have the confidence to say, this is my track, this is where
Right.
this is my lane?
It's a huge issue because, and I made this mistake, and everybody I know made this mistake. We took all comers. I mean, the customer selection process was, well, do they have a checkbook? And if I put a mirror in front of them, will it fog? And hey, even if the mirror didn't fog, I could probably still get some estate work out of it. So, but that's a lousy customer selection strategy, because of what happens over time. And I understand the urge. We've got to make money. We've got to feed our family, blah, blah, blah. But the problem with it is over time, you will fill your airplane, your fixed capacity, with a lot of low value customers. Your attention and focus will be dispersed amongst different industries and businesses. And in today's world, with all the apps and the ecosystems that we have, there is no way you can be an expert on what apps restaurants use versus dentists and versus companies that have inventory or that manufacture. There's no way. You can't be all things to all people. We have to stop thinking we're tequila. You can't be all things to all people. You have to focus. Now, it may be slower growth at the upstart, but it's going to be far more profitable growth. You're going to get much more pricing power being a specialist than you are a generalist. You're going to be able to expand your geographic territory of where you attract customers. Example, I know a guy who does nothing but microbreweries. He's out of Florida. He's got customers in your country, all over your country, by the way. He's got customers in New Zealand. He's got customers in the UK. He's got customers in Canada. Why? Because that's all he does. He knows the economics of that business backwards and forwards, and he speaks at their conferences, writes in the magazines that they read. He's perceived as an expert. He's the go-to guy when it comes to microbrewers. And so therefore, your geographic area just widened tremendously if you're a specialist.
And it comes from, I think sometimes it feels like a bit of a scarcity mentality, doesn't it? It's like, well, we've got to get all that we can, rather than the abundance mentality, knowing that there is enough for everyone, and it's okay if I niche into this, because if I get really good at this, that they will come, like you're saying with the brewery guy.
And even better, if we were all special, now I'm just talking hypothetically, but if all bookkeepers, accounting firms were hyper specialized like we advocate, then think of it, then when somebody comes in that's not a dentist or a microbrewer, you'd refer them out
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
right bookkeeper the medical profession figured this out 80 years ago. So we're daft in this. We've been really slow behind the curve. But if you're a specialist and I've got a particular type of cancer that you're a specialist in, I'm going to fly to you no matter where you are in the world, Mayo Clinic, Sloan Kettering, wherever it might be. And that's the brilliance of specialists. Plus, they earn more money. They're perceived as higher value. Everybody wants a specialist in their business. And if you are, well, then your pricing is much easier. I much rather price for a specialist than a generalist.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison with the medical industry. You did right. Like you seek out the best in that world if you've got a particular problem. And yeah, and there's no reason why we can't do that ourselves, right?
And when you're a generalist, you search the zip code for a general physician. You
Yes.
search
Yeah, yeah.
who's ever local, but specialists, no, they command a much wider geographic territory. And I think more interesting cases and issues and problems that they can solve and also, really help transform their customers. So yeah,
Mm,
I'm a big believer. In fact, I know one of your questions about books I recommend. This is not a pricing book, but it sets up your pricing. It's called Positioning for Professionals, and it's by my VeraSage colleague, Tim Williams, who works exclusively with marketing agencies. In fact, I think he's in Australia or is about to be. He's down there giving a talk. He works a lot with the marketing agency, the marketing organizations down there. And it's a phenomenal book. It's less than 200 pages, so it's
yeah.
not a tome like mine.
Yeah.
And you will close that book and you will go, we are going to niche.
Fantastic. I'm getting that book today. Fantastic.
And
I've gone right off script. I'm so sorry, Ron. It's
no, that's all
I
right. That's all right.
I'm going to go. I knew I'd go down rabbit warrens. I was so excited about our interview. So even after everything we've learned about pricing our services, to this day, pricing for bookkeepers and accountants seem to cause such a stir of emotions, of complexity and confusion. Why do you think this is the case, and what's some tips that help us through this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think part of it is because there's a lot of conflicting advice out there about what pricing is and value, especially value pricing. I think the word value pricing has been completely corroded. So people have misconceptions that it's some type of contingency. I'm going to take a percentage of the tax I save you. That has nothing to do with value pricing. Um, I also think that we accountants, we wait to do something until it's perfect. And that's the enemy of progress. This is where I think tech companies really have the right attitude. Just get the product out there, minimum viable product, whatever they call it, and then we'll fix it as we go. You have to be willing to experiment, and you have to be willing to make mistakes. I mean, you're making a ton of mistakes now at the billable hour. I don't care what the rate is, you're making a ton of mistakes. But here's the difference, Sharon. You're not learning from those mistakes. When you have a write down, when you have an angry customer that demands a write down, or you left a ton of money on the table, you'll never know it with the billable hour because it doesn't track it. It's not on your radar screen. You don't pay any attention to it. With value pricing, you start paying attention to those mistakes and you correct them. So your pricing will never be final. It's an iterative process. Your pricing is not carved in stone. It can be changed. And it's so just do it. I mean, it's the Nike slogan. I hate to be trite, but just do it and you will get better as you go and you will build more confidence. I mean, look, I'm conflicted on this because as we know, there are two ways to change somebody's behavior. You can change their thinking and you can change their actions. Now, it's hard for me as somebody who writes books and speaks to change somebody's actions. So I have to rely on changing people's thinking. And that's why I write these books that try and do that. But that's not successful with everybody. If you just start doing it, you'll get better at it. Pricing is a skill. It's an art, but it's also a skill like tennis or golf. The more you play, the better you get. And I promise you, when a professional golfer makes a bad shot, they don't throw their clubs in the lake and say, oh, screw this game, it's too hard.
Yeah.
They try and learn from it and do better
Tweak
next
it.
time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to go down a rabbit warren again. Sorry, Ron. I think when I'm working with my clients, it's like I sort of see with compliance work, it's sort of so measurable against everyone else. Is that like when you're charging a BAS or when when you're doing end of year, or we can measure it so well. Whereas when we start pulling in more advisory sort of stuff, that's when I feel like value pricing is a lot easier to do. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, if a lot of people think that the compliance work is a commodity or it's going away. I mean, I've heard this ever since I joined this profession in
Yeah.
1984. That compliance work is going away. Well, I got news for you. It's only getting more complicated.
Yeah.
Governments haven't stopped regulating. They haven't stopped tweaking their tax codes. It's always going to be here. That's just part of the nature of our bureaucratic system, that we're going to have compliance. And I think compliance is actually worth quite a bit. If that's all you did was compliance, you could charge a king's ransom if you position it right and you have the right strategy, if you specialize, if you're niched, all of that,
Yeah.
and you deliver a great customer experience. But I do think that it's when we move up to those higher value services like advisory, like budgeting, like cash flow, helping small businesses with cash flow, which is an endemic problem around the world with small businesses. And bookkeepers are well positioned to help their customers with that. For those higher value services, that's when we need to run away from the billable hour the most, because the
Mm.
billable hour leaves money on the table. Why? Because it doesn't take into account customer value. It doesn't know, is the customer in the desert? Is the customer washing their dog? Or is the customer flooded in their basement? And with value pricing, you have to go through this discovery process. Uh, and I use that example, not to say take advantage of the person in the desert and charge them $2 million for their
Mm.
bottle of water, but to illustrate that value is very contextual based on what they're trying to accomplish. And our profession doesn't do a good job on diagnosis. We tend to jump right into prescription. And as the
Yeah.
medical profession says, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice.
Mm. Mm. So how do we, again, sorry, I'm going off script. How do we resolve the fact that, because when I'm talking to my clients, it's like the feeling of value pricing or packaging it up where, inevitably you're making more for the service, which again reflects the value you're offering. How do we resolve the fact in our head that we feel like we're ripping our clients off by doing that?
Well, it kind of goes back to the coffee example, that when a customer voluntarily purchases from you, they by definition are earning a profit. Now, if you
Mm.
can get their profit up, then you can get your price up. You're not going to capture 100% of the value. Otherwise, there would be no customer profit. Your
Mm.
price is going to be less than the value to the customer. So if you're continuously innovating, offering new services, you're pushing up the value bar, but your price bar can rise as well. This is what Apple is such a master at. Every time Apple comes out with new technology, yes, they raise the price on that, but they lower the price on the older stuff.
Mm.
And it's
Mm.
perceived as, wow, this is a super innovative company. And of course, people line up to buy the new stuff at the higher price. But that's why we have to constantly innovate. And we're not too good at that either, because I think we're too busy tracking 6 minutes of our day. And, innovation is the opposite of efficiency. You have to be
Yeah.
inefficient to be able to innovate.
Here's a workaround with this, right? I was just thinking when I built the bookkeeping business with my sister-in-law, because I'm not a bookkeeper or an accountant, um, I found when I was talking to clients, if because I wasn't selling my skill, right? So it was easier for me to sell my bookkeepers. And then I know like a lot of bookkeepers think, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe that I can't price that high because I'm just new. What's your thoughts on, like, I had a team of 15, I had 12, 3 accountants and 9 bookkeepers working for me. And they were amazing. Like, they were really fantastic. So I could sell their skills. So what's your thoughts on building a practice where if this is hard for you to sell value pricing, you can pull experts in to work for you, so it kind of takes the heat off you until you get used to it, maybe.
This is a great point, and I suggest this even to solos. If you're just a one person shop, my advice to you is do not price your own work. And this
Mm.
this is exactly why authors and actors and actresses have agents. Because
Mm.
if I'm selling you, Sharon, I can brag, I can be brave as a lion with your pricing. I will tell the world how great you are. I can't say that about myself. I'll look
No.
braggadocious. I'll
Yeah.
look like a heel, but I can do it with you. So if you're in a two partner firm, no partner should price their own work. They should price each other's work. If you have team members, let them price the work. Now this isn't universally true, but it's darn near universally true. Team members are more aggressive pricers than the owners. First off,
Mm,
they don't have the fear of loss that the owners have. Like, oh, gee, if we price this too high, we're not going to get the customer. Um, because they're at the coal face. They know they have to work. They know the work that's involved, and they know the value that they're providing to the customer. They're responsive. They're given a great experience. All of that. There's great nobility in being paid what we're worth. And
mm,
that's why companies have professional pricers now, because it's not the salesmen that are out there pricing, it's the pricers. Because the quickest way to make a sale for the salesman is to cut the price. Well,
yeah.
that's death to a professional pricer. So they let the pricers have the authority on the pricing. The salesman can still nurture the relationship, develop the relationship, all of that, but they don't get pricing authority anymore, not as much as they used to.
Yeah, so that's kind of a really good strategy to take the heat off and price for somebody else in the firm. And quite often, sorry, what?
Oh, I was just going to say, if you don't have team members or if you don't have another partner, you are a solo, have your spouse do your
Yeah,
pricing, because your
nice.
spouse has to live with the consequences of you working too hard, of you giving yourself away, of you coming home and complaining, of missing your kids, soccer
Mm,
games or whatever. They have to, and they're not going to let you price cheap.
cheap.
They're
Yeah.
gonna sell you at a very high value.
Yeah. Great. I love it. Um, so I'm speaking with bookkeepers on a weekly basis who are still charging by the hour and many as low as $50 to $60 an hour. What's some tips you can give these bookkeepers specifically, and the ones who are scared to death of having the conversations with the clients to bring those prices up?
If you're really just charging an hourly rate, just fix it. Just
Yeah.
fix it. Don't move straight to value pricing. Go to fixed pricing first. If you look back on this customer and you say, I've been charging them $50 an hour. On average, they pay me, I'm just making up numbers. On average, they pay me $500 a year. Fix it at 600 and go down the road and
Yeah.
stop worrying about it, because what we're trying I started this whole pricing thing in 1989 in my firm, not because of the economics that I write about in the book that you held up earlier, not for all the marketing reasons, economic reasons that we talked about. I did it because I thought hourly billing was a lousy customer experience, period,
Mm,
because we didn't give our customers price certainty. I can't think of anything that we buy as consumers where we don't know the price beforehand.
mm,
We
mm,
want to make that price value comparison just like when we buy a flat white or a
mm.
car or a house. It's a really rotten time to find out your customer doesn't like your price after you've done all the work.
Work.
So if
Yes.
if you give them a bill in arrears, what we call bill and ducking, basically, and just kind of pray that they're going to pay it without complaining, that's a lousy customer experience, because what some of them are going to come back to you just like they did to me and say, why didn't you tell me it was going to be this expensive? And my
Mm,
only answer to that was, I spent the time.
yeah.
I showed them my
It
timesheet. I spent the
was.
time. And well, they don't care about the time. Why couldn't you have just told me it was going to cost 600? Maybe we could have figured out some things to cut, or maybe I do more of the work, or whatever it is. You have a lot more options before you do the work. After you do the work, now you're just on your knees begging to get paid whatever they're gracious enough to pay you. And that's not a good position to be in. So just fix your price, and also realize this is done one customer at a time.
Mm,
One
mm,
so you can move at a pace that's comfortable for you. You can get a couple wins under your belt, which will boost your confidence. But it's again, it's that changing the action will change your,
mm,
your thinking. Now you're going to make some mistakes, but you'll learn from them. You go, oh geez, I know why that job went south. We didn't do a change order. Something changed. There was scope creep, whatever. But you'll learn from that. With hourly billing, there is no learning. You just move from one dumb mistake to, and you tend to repeat the same mistakes over. And there's no education in the third kick of the mule.
mm. I think when I talk with my clients about those fixed pricing, it's like, well, what if I fix it and um, it doesn't work out, or I'm doing more work and I've already fixed it. And so what's your sort of fallback with that? Like mine is that, make sure you have an appointment 3 months after just to check in. What would you say would be a good sort of suggestion if they do the fixed pricing and then it just blows out?
Right. And back in the early days when I started this, you see this in the book with my example of the fixed price agreement, I do have a clause in there that says we will meet in 3 months or 6 months and review this and make sure it's working for both of us. And the price, if it needs to be adjusted, it will be. Now, eventually, once you get really good, you can remove that because you don't need that anymore. That's an absolute crutch. But if you're really worried about it, then I would just say shorten up the term of the fixed price agreement. Don't go a full year, go for 3 months and say, we'll meet at the end of 3 months and we'll reevaluate everything. And then you should have a good idea of whether or not, they call you every day or they need a lot of hand holding or whatever it might be. But I would caution people not to equate time spent with value to the customer. That's a completely inward looking mechanism. If you look outward to that value, is the client in the desert? Are they washing their dog, or are they flooded in their basement? You'll get a better idea for value, and you'll get really good at setting a price that's commensurate with that value, where there's still enough profit for the customer to keep them happy, but there's more than enough profit for you over and above hourly billing.
Mm, mm. It's so much between our heads, between our ears, isn't it?
It's all mental. And one pricing expert, and I forget which one, but said price is a terrorist. And what he meant by that was, terrorists are designed to freak us out, right? More than the actual threat. They want us walking around or getting on the plane thinking about, that threat. And pricing does that to us, does it to the seller. It doesn't do it to the buyer. Price isn't a terrorist to a buyer. We're used to looking at all sorts of things on the internet or when we go shopping. Oh, what's the price? That's why I like the word price over fee, because it's a nice, benign, neutral word. Fee conjures up negative images. Who likes to pay fees? Who likes government fees? But price, we're all used to saying, well, what's the price? Now, if it's too high, I don't have to buy.
Yeah.
But if it's something I'm interested in, well, then yeah, maybe I'll pay the price. And therefore, price is not a terrorist to the customer. It's only a terrorist in our mind. So we fret about it and rack our brains over it far more than the customer. A lot of times when you start out, especially if you're offering options, like 3 options, and you put that in front of the customer, they'll look at it and they'll go, oh, okay, let's start, and I'll take the top option. And you worked on it for 2 weeks and you think, oh, geez, I probably left money on the table. He made the decision. They made the decision too fast. And that's when you start to get really good at pricing, is when you stop asking, did I underprice this? Am I going to lose money on this? And start asking yourself, I wonder how much money I left on the table. And then you'll be bolder when you do the next pricing, and bolder after that, and bolder. And then your pricing starts to ratchet upwards. But so does your value.
And the confidence comes from the action, right? So like just taking that step at it, one client at a time,
one customer at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a big debate. Some price consultants out there will tell you start with new customers, because it's really easy, because it'll differentiate you from all the other bookkeepers that charge by the hour, blah blah blah. I'm agnostic about that, because I've seen it be successful both ways. I don't care if you start with new customers. I don't care if you start with old. In fact, I would say definitely start with new. That's a no-brainer, because of all those reasons. It's going to be a great differentiator. You're going to give them price certainty, which they value tremendously. But also, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. As you're putting all new customers on fixed prices, start converting your older customers as well. And that's how I did it in my firm. I actually started with my long-term customers, because I figured I had a good relationship with them. I could talk to them over a beer and be very frank and candid that I knew they hated how I priced. They hated how I nickeled and dimed them for every phone call, for every meeting. They never knew how much it was going to pay. And then to boot, with some of them, because they had cyclical cash flow, I did all the tax work. The tax work is all bunched up in the United States in the March, April. And then I'd send them a bill in May, and their business is at a cash flow low point. And here I am dropping a $3,000 bill on them. And, I shouldn't do that. I, of all people, know their cash flow, for crying out loud, or should. And that's why I allowed them to spread out their payment terms to me based on their cash flow, not my workflow, their cash flow. And they
Yeah.
greatly appreciated that.
I was going to say that's more value for them then, isn't it? They're feeling more
Absolutely.
confident. They're not going to be hit with a big bill or a big surprise. So,
Exactly.
okay. So in your experience, what are the transformations you've seen in businesses that have implemented value pricing, and how will this change for the subscription model, both financially and emotionally?
Wow. Well, subscription is a completely different animal. It's not a pricing model. It's a
Mm,
business model. And what I mean by business, how we define business model is how your firm creates value for your customers and how it captures that value. Now, the capturing is the pricing strategy, but in the subscription model, you have to ask, I think, a more profound question. And this is kind of after you figure out your strategy, your niche and positioning and all. Am I going to be a vegan restaurant? Am I going to be McDonald's, or am I going to be an upend steakhouse? Once you figure out those issues, then I want you, when you start on your pricing strategy, to ask what we call the revenue model question. What do you want your customers to pay for?
mm,
Not how much. That's pricing strategy. What do you want them to pay for? Because if you think about it, there's many examples of this, but let me just give you one. There's a company in the Netherlands called Sinsam,
mm,
and they have revolutionized optical wear, so contacts and glasses. And if you talk to anybody who wears glasses or contacts and ask them about the experience of upgrading them, getting an eye exam, new prescription, they'll say it's a pain in the butt.
mm,
I have to go over here for this. I have to go over there for that. I have to wait 3 days, whatever. These these founders took this business and they said, what are people really paying for? What do we want them to pay for? We don't want to pay them to pay for each service along the chain, the eye exam, the glasses, the lenses, updating their sunglasses, blah, blah, blah. They're buying perfect eyesight. So just let them subscribe to us and we'll give you as many eye exams as you we'll give you as many eye exams as you need. We'll update 5 pair of glasses at a time and you're covered, your subscription. So they're not looking at it as a fee for service. And that's the big thing about subscription. It monetizes the relationship, not the transactions, not the services. The services become a means to an end. The end is the perfect eyesight. And for us as bookkeepers and accountants, our end, the revenue model, that how I answer that question, what do you want our customers to pay us for? Transformations, helping them go from where they are to where they want to be. Because when you guide a customer to a transformation, help them grow their business, help them get their kid in college, help them plan their estate, all the things that we as financial professionals can do, when you guide a transformation, and that's all you can do is guide it, because the customer has to voluntarily, be transformed on their own, but you guide them, you're their Sherpa. When you offer transformations like that, the customer is the product.
mm,
And that's as high as you can go on the value curve on this mortal coil. Beyond a transformation is something that for the other world to deal with. But down here, among the crooked timber of humanity, transformation is the highest point, and we are poised to do that every day. And not only that, but we can do them serially with the customer. One year we can help them, expand their business, buy equipment, get a small business loan. Another year we can help them with some other big transformational project. And the services then that surround it are completely incidental. And we stop focusing on those. Yes, we have to do them. Yes, we have to do them competently, but that's not what they're buying. They're buying the
yeah,
perfect eyesight.
yeah. I love the comparison with that, because you would imagine it would be harder for a business like that to come up with a subscription model. We've got, as bookkeepers, we've got so much more opportunity
We do.
to offer in that, and the value with that, and the what we can sort of, as you say, what we can do. Whereas with a glasses shop, there's not much that they can do with that, and they're obviously successfully doing it. That's amazing. I love that comparison.
They have something like 300,000 subscribers. And as you can imagine, the optometry world is pretty mature, pretty stale,
Yeah.
sclerotic, if you will. All the experts told him this will never work. Nobody's going to
Yeah.
subscribe to eyeglasses. But these founders, who were all young folks, they said, we're not asking them to subscribe to eyeglasses. They're subscribing to perfect eyesight. We're giving them convenience. We're giving them peace of mind. We're having a frictionless relationship. We make everything in the chain really easy for them. We save them time. I think the biggest sin in the world today is wasting our customers' time with a
Yeah.
lousy digital portal that we have. We have tax practitioners here in the United States who send out their customers 200-page tax organizers. You should be shot for wasting
Yeah.
your customers' time. If you
Yeah.
can save your customers time, that's the biggest, that they'll pay a fortune for that. And
Mm,
that's what the eyeglass people are doing. They're saving
mm.
people time and they're giving them convenience and peace of mind. Hey, if something happens and I need a new eye exam, I'm taken care of. I don't have to worry about it. I can just go in and get it. And then people worry, well, what if somebody comes in 20 times a day, to get their eyes examined every month or something? Well, it's not, first off, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But second off, even if it did, okay, they're getting a lot of value for that. They're going to stick with you for life.
Yeah, yeah. And when I think about that from the bookkeeper's perspective, it's like, and I go because I hear it so often, I go straight into what, like, they're paying wages and they're paying rent and they're doing like, and you want to go into the granular, but if you're getting however many subscribers, as you're saying, that covers all that, doesn't it?
And it's predictable revenue. There's a big difference between recurring revenue and reoccurring revenue. So let me see
Yeah.
if I can explain that quickly. Reoccurring revenue is what we as accountants and bookkeepers get because it's the compliance work. It's that evergreen revenue that we know is going to crop up. Now, maybe
Mm,
some other special projects crop up in there, maybe some advisory, but those come and go. They're kind of like a rash. They're more sporadic.
mm,
But when you offer subscription, you're on a recurring revenue model, and that's more predictable and it's
mm.
more valuable if you go to sell your practice. So, example, the normal accounting firm, bookkeeping firm sells for 1 times turnover. If you're a value priced practice, I've had Black Swan sell at 3.5 times.
Is that
If you're
right?
if you're
Wow.
if you're subscription based with recurring revenue, we're starting to see multiples, and this is very young because there's not many accounting firms out there doing this yet. But in industries that are very similar, we're seeing multiples of between 5 and 15 because people who
How big
buy
is it?
businesses put far more value on recurring revenue
Right.
than they do on reoccurring.
Interesting, because they know that it's just, yeah, it's
It's predict.
predictable.
You're
Right.
starting on this is a football analogy. I apologize, but you're starting on the 50-yard line every day rather than starting at zero.
At the beginning, every
At the
time. Yeah,
beginning, every
yeah,
time you have to sell all the time. You have to cross sell. You have to sell services. It's no longer about the service. We've taken the service out of the revenue model. They're
yeah,
incidental. They're a means to the perfect eyesight. It's the perfect eyesight that we shoot for. And
yeah.
boy, if you can figure that out, and I think we can with transformations, because like you said, we can do lots of transformations. We
So
have so many
much.
opportunities, especially bookkeepers, because they're more diverse than accountants. So maybe you worked in HR as a prior, person before you started your practice, and
Yeah,
maybe you can help them with their HR issues. There's
yeah,
lots
yeah.
of things we can do.
Yeah, wow. We're not
It's
even gonna.
it Sharon, it's not about, one of the things that frustrates me, I think one of your questions is what frustrates you about this industry.
Yeah,
Um, one, we always talk about solving problems.
yeah.
Customers don't buy hours, they buy solutions to problems. That is such a limiting view. If all we're doing for our customers is solving a problem, all we're doing is reverting them back to the status quo. We're not advancing them.
Helping them grow. Yeah.
When you transform, when you guide a transformation, you're actually growing the customer. Think of the transformations that happen in our lives. We have a baby, we get married, we wear a ring, we
Mm,
serve in the military, we might have medals and ribbons, we get trophies, we get diplomas on our wall. These things change us.
mm.
And that's what we have the power to do as financial professionals. We're no different than doctors. A
Mm.
lot of doctors now in the States are offering what's called direct primary care. and some of them call it concierge medicine, where you subscribe to the doctor. They're GPs, although specialists are moving into this as well. But you subscribe to the doctor and he's your GP or she's your GP, you're covered for anything you need. You can see them same day. You can email them, text them. This is all, they did this all pre-COVID. There's about 1,800 of these practices around the United States. They're growing by leaps and bounds every day. The demand is overwhelming. Amazon just bought a $3.9 billion chain of these direct primary care physicians. But here's the thing, the DPC, because they have fewer patients than a regular fee for service general physician, a regular GPS in the States has about 3,400 patients. That's why you get to spend 5 minutes with them. A DPC doc has 600 max.
Okay.
And therefore, they always have the capacity to handle same day. They'll even come to you, your office, your home, whatever. They'll do whatever it takes. They'll handle anything they can do under their roof that they're competent. Now, obviously, they're not going to cure cancer. They're not going to give heart surgery because that's not what they do. But they're there to keep you healthy, not just to cure you when you're sick. They want to keep you healthy.
Which is what we want.
Which is what we do as accountants. We keep our customers financially healthy, helping with their budgeting, their cash flow issues. The similarities are unbelievable between what doctors do and what we do. And guess what? We both entered this profession to help people. And yet, because we're on this fee for service treadmill or trading hours for dollars, we're not helping our people. We're paying lip service to it. The subscription model puts that relationship back at the center.
Yeah, and I can't help but sort of think about too, in working with my clients, that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when you go to, like, when you're stepping into and looking through the lens of helping and growing your clients through, value pricing and subscription pricing, we grow ourselves in that. Like the confidence that we gain by doing that and seeing the results, it's like that then feeds back to help us then grow further for ourselves, which it happens. Which
that's a great point. And I think you grow more as you niche. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, because we think, well, if I'm diverse and have diversity of clients, I'll be, I'll know a whole bunch of things about a wide range of industries. No, you won't. You'll know a little bit about a lot of industries. But when you specialize in nothing but dentists, like my friend does, he has seen everything that can happen to a dentist. Divorce with partners, divorce with spouses, opening up offices, closing offices, buying new, he's seen it all. He can help guide. He knows their economics better than they do. And that gives you unbelievable confidence. I mean, he is the pro from Dover when it comes to dental practices. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And the confidence that would give him to be able to help and see the transformations within his industry. Yeah.
Yep. So he doesn't chase customers. He chooses them.
Nice. What a lovely way to run a business. That's awesome. We've only scratched the surface here, so I'm going to go straight to the question that I think will be on the top of everyone's lip. So Pure Bookkeeping and the Entrepreneurial Bookkeeper are about to go on a roadshow called the Firm of the Future Roadshow. We've decided to do this because we've seen so much change over the years with software and development and offshore and automation. Can you paint a picture of what, for us, of what the firm of the future for bookkeepers would look like in 5 years' time through your lens? And of course, can we see it through your lens of subscription pricing, knowing that that's your new book coming up, and to give us sort of a bit of an idea of what that's going to look like for everyone?
Yeah, I think the firm of the future, your customers that you select, that you choose, will subscribe to you. You will have recurring revenue. You won't be selling services. You'll be guiding transformations for your customers. And it will allow you to, if you want your positioning and strategy, if you want to be Apple and charge a very high premium price because you're boutique, you have fewer customers, but you give them white glove service, that's possible. You can also go the other way and be more of a volume shop where you just focus maybe on compliance and you don't do anything else. You just do tax. You do this maybe one particular industry or niche. I've seen bookkeepers specialize in gig economy workers, people that drive for Uber and Lyft and sell on Etsy or eBay or whatever. I mean, that's a perfectly acceptable niche. You can do that with subscription. I think the subscription model is the perfect model for us because it puts the relationship at the center and it de-emphasizes the services, and we're no longer trading services for dollars, which I think is just a rat race and
Mm,
distracts us from why we entered this business in the first place, which is to help people.
mm, mm. So for those that are, have sort of maybe got one one foot in either camp with value pricing and hourly pricing at the moment, and then now we're talking about subscription models, what's your advice on how to then transition from this one foot in each camp of hourly rate and value pricing and then to go to the subscription model?
Well, I'll start with some good news. If you're hourly pricing only and you haven't put your foot in the camp yet of fixed price or value pricing, I
Yep.
think you can leap right to subscription. I see
Nice.
no reason to move into value pricing or even fixed pricing. Just jump to subscription because we're starting to see that firms that now value price and we put subscription ideas in front of them, they start to freak out. It's like,
Mm,
because now they're kind of tied to their legacy systems of value pricing, pricing the customer, and that's kind of hard to overcome. So I think it's a great advantage if you can just leapfrog, just like, the poorer countries of the world kind of never put in landlines. They just
mm,
leapfrog to digital or, cellular technology for the phones. That was
mm.
much easier for them. So they didn't
Yeah.
have to have all these legacy, telephone poles with all these wires around. They just leapfrog. And I think you can do the same. If you're value pricing, it's not that big of a mind shift. There are some things though that are different about subscription, like the de-emphasis on service, like the revenue model question. Um, and you start to realize that we're pricing a portfolio here. If we're not pricing the customer, we're pricing the relationship and the portfolio. And what I mean by that is, like these concierge doctors who I've learned a lot from, they have
Mm,
600 patients. Now we know some of those patients are going to maybe come in 2 or 3 times a month because I don't know, maybe they ran a knife through their palm and need
mm,
stitches or something. But a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are just paying for that peace of mind, convenience. Maybe they text the doc every now and then, ask a question about their kid, take a
mm,
picture of a rash, say, should I worry about this?
mm,
Whatever. But so not everybody's using you and consuming your resources at the same level. You have to
mm,
get over that fact that,
mm,
oh, geez, what about the hypochondriac that is going to come in and camp out in the office every day? Well, you can always fire a customer if they're unreasonable. That's the other thing.
mm,
And a doctor would, if somebody really was a hypochondriac, they'd probably, if there was no hope for them, they'd probably just terminate the relationship.
mm,
But I think you have to get over that mindset that the only way that we can provide value is by piling up services brick by brick by brick. Sometimes
mm.
it's like you were saying, Sharon, when we were on pre-call. Um, Sometimes it's just talking to your customers
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just engaging them about. Tell me about the significant decisions you have to make in your business in the next
Mm,
6 months.
mm,
Walk through that with them. So that's just a conversation over a cup of coffee, but there's tremendous value there. And you'll
mm,
have the capacity to do it because you won't be on this treadmill of I gotta keep all 8 hours busy every day because I'm trading dollars for time.
mm,
It doesn't work
mm.
that way. You always have capacity for your customers because you have
Yeah.
fewer of them.
So, uh, I know you've got the book coming out. If you could tell us a little bit more about that, but what, how can we? What's the first step for us to be able to go into that subscription model? Is it getting the book and getting clear? How can we transition, Ron?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is probably going to take a little bit of thinking and studying. So, one of the things that you can do that's very easy is you can go to the souloфenterprise.com, and that's the radio show I do with Ed Class from Sage, and up there we have a tab uh, which is sorting the shows by topic, and so. One sort is, my favorite shows, Ed's favorite shows, but we have one that's subscription business model. And if you
Mm,
click on that, you'll see a lot of different shows that we've done, sometimes just me and Ed talking about the business model and how it differs from value pricing. And we've also interviewed the 4 best-selling authors in this space. So Teen Zoe from Zora, the software company that runs the back office for subscription businesses, the accounting and all, because the accounting's different.
yeah.
He wrote a book called Subscribed, which is phenomenal that everybody should read. John
Mhm.
Warlow, he's a Canadian who wrote the book The Automatic Customer. It's a great book. Those are 2 highly recommended books on subscription. So I'd say read those, listen to some of our shows. You can even listen to some lawyers who have moved to this, like Matthew Burgess in Brisbane, and there's others. And then we've interviewed a direct primary care physician, Dr. Paul Thomas. And since we've had him on the show 4 times. Over this 4-year period, this guy has grown his practice from being a solo doctor. He didn't even have an assistant, didn't even have a secretary, just him in an office. He's grown to 3 other doctors, and now he's opening up a second office and putting 2 doctors or 3 doctors in there. So these things are growing like weeds because the demand is so high for them, and they've improved the service for the customer. So, and I think there's a lot of similarities between doctors and accountants, because traditional doctors, at least in this country, I know it's a bit different in Oz, but in this country, they're paid on a fee for service. So the only way they make money is if you come into the office and they do something to you. They order a test. They're not doing things for you. They're doing things to you. And I'm not saying they're bad people. It's just the system it's the revenue model that they operate under. The concierge doctor that's the last thing he wants to do is order a service or a drug for you. He's trying to get you off of those things. And their patients tend to be healthier, are admitted to the hospital less, live longer, have less comorbidities. Even the drug companies are kind of pissed off at them because TPH doctors' patients take less drugs.
Exactly. Yeah. But how much more appealing would it be to be seeing a doctor like that, to know that that's better for your health and your outcomes, right?
And what would it be like to walk into a doctor's office that doesn't have a waiting room, where you walk right in and see the doc? There's no waiting because they only have 600 patients. So they're not seeing 60 people a day. They might see 5 people a day because they might spend over an hour with you. And that's how they get to know you and your family history and keep you healthy. And we should be doing the same thing.
That's it. And they're making great money doing it, which is, they're a lot nicer probably to deal with. And the whole package is better.
Quality of life is much better for them. And they're usually make more or just as much as a fee for service doctor. They did surveys of this, and 99% of them said they would never, ever go back.
Is that right? Wow.
So
I like that. You mentioned that website. I'll make sure when we put the recording up that I'll put the link in. And of course, you've mentioned about 3 or 4 amazing books, which I will be ordering, but I'll put those up into the link as well.
And just one more thing on the book. I did write it with Paul Dunn. And the reason was we published a book that we wrote together in 2003 called The Firm of the Future. And the publisher came to us and said, would you like to update that book for 20 years later, essentially? And I said, no, I don't want to write old books. I want to write new books. So we pitched this idea to them and they loved it. And that's why I did it with Paul. And Paul is such an inspiration. So we're writing in our own voice. So the first 7 chapters of the book are Paul's. And then the last, I think 16 are mine, that get into the more the nuts and bolts. Paul's more inspirational. I'm more workshop. So he's the keynote and I'm the workshop. And that's how we structured the book. And I'm just really excited to be able to work with Paul because he's a legend in the accounting and finance space.
Yeah, he certainly is. He does some travel, Paul, doesn't he, with his keynote speaking and what have you. I saw him a few years ago out here. He's very incredible.
He is.
So the book for our audience is called Time's Up. We can pre-order it through this website that I'll be popping up. So I'll be doing that shortly. But I reckon we've just scratched the surface, Rod. There was a lot more questions I sent to you. So hopefully we can get you back to have another chat about this when the book is released. And we've only literally scratched the surface with the questions that I've sent through to you. So I want to thank you.
I would love to come back, Sharon.
Thank you so much. I would love that. And certainly to talk more about this subscription model. You've got me excited about it. The analogies that you drew with the optical industry as well as the doctors, it makes it make sense in my head. So the more it can make sense, the better it is for us to be able to transition, right? So
that's how it made sense to me, by the way, just looking at what other industries are doing, which I don't think we do enough of as a profession. We look at ourselves. We read all the surveys on what other accountants and bookkeepers are doing, but we should be looking out to the doctors and looking out to other subscription businesses. They're doing a lot of interesting things out there.
Yeah, absolutely. In industries you wouldn't think would be able to make that work. So
Right.
it's, and we've got in what you're saying as well, we've got more opportunity with this, I feel. So
We do.
yeah, yeah.
We have a
Thank
very
you.
strong relationship with the customer that other businesses would envy and do
Yes.
envy, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ron Baker. I really appreciate your time, and yeah, look forward to speaking with you before the end of the year.
Thanks, Sharon. It
Okay,
was
thank you
fun.
so much. Take care. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone for coming along. Bye-bye. Bye.